Welcome to our panel, Doing Business Internationally. And I'm proud, I'm glad to have two real experts here on stage. On the very right, we have Rudolf Rouffier. He is working for one of the biggest law firms in the world, for Clifford Chance, a London-based law firm. And they also are now consulting cannabis investments. And on my right, we have Pete Patterson from Vulcan Medical, who is the leading Danish extractor for medical cannabis products. And they are licensed since 2018 in Denmark.
No, incorporated. We just got licensed this year.
They incorporated since 2018. They got licensed this year. And I think you just tell us a little bit about your activities in Denmark.
Is this on? Oh, there we go. We are extracting in Denmark, taking some cannabis flower from the various cultivation companies that are there. There's some phenomenal quality that's being grown. We're turning it into oil, and that's heading to places like here in Germany. And we're EU GMP certified, for real.
Rudolf, cannabis is not so long a topic in your company, I think, not such a long time. How did it come? A big law firm is interested in the cannabis market right now.
Thanks, Michael. Well, Clifford Chance is, as you said, a very large law firm. We're a full-service business law firm. We're based in London, but we have offices all over the world. I'm based in Australia. And in Europe, and I do international disputes. Our cannabis practice has been kicking off, I'd say, 5 to 6 years ago, and interestingly, it started off here in Germany, in Düsseldorf, Frankfurt, and München. We do mostly regulatory matters, corporate matters, M&A, in our cannabis practice, out of Germany, but I take care of the divorce side of things. I'm afraid the disputes, and that's why I'm here to talk to you about today.
Thank you very much. Pete, my first question to you, you also have experience in the Canadian cannabis market. What's the main difference to the European cannabis market?
I would say the commercial flexibility. I think we know that the Canadian market is much more mature, while we see the European market really just starting to develop its legs right now, trying to figure out how patients are going to be granted access. In Canada, there was a wonderful program with mail order cannabis for access, versus here, seeing in Germany, they actually have cannabis going through the pharmacies, right? So, yeah, it's just maturity. I see it following a very similar path in terms of how cannabis industry has been maturing from, say, the North American markets and over here, and watching. Yeah, it's almost like watching it happen in the future, right? Like we can see how it's been evolving, and it's like it's already been mapped out for us. Everything starts with cultivation, then we start to see lots of extraction happening, then we see more focus on brands and distribution and access.
And would you say it's? Let me ask something different. Why did you not come to Germany and grow? Because Germany grow cannabis or extract cannabis. Why did you come? Why did you go to Denmark? Because the law in Germany was implemented much earlier than in Denmark. Was it harder to apply here, or?
Well, I didn't want to compete with the Demican guys. They had such a great proposal. That was the first one. But no, on the other side of things, like we took a look at the German market, great market. But we were looking for something with a little bit more commercial access. Denmark, it didn't have any restrictions on how much we could produce, where we could send it, what we could do. So it was really just that commercial viability. Also on the Danish side of things, just kind of doing business internationally, we took a look at the government infrastructure and how much support was at that government level and how stable that program was. And that was another big indicator, because we were looking at Portugal or Greece or Germany, and it just made sense. In Denmark, it was like an 8 out of 9 vote to be passed through by law. So if the political regime was to change, there was still majority favor for that. So yeah, it just made sense for us for our investment.
Rudolfi, thanks a lot. You know, in Europe, we have a very lot different regulations on medical cannabis. You are based in Australia. Australia is also importing to the German market. As a lawyer, what would you, or as an investment expert, what would you recommend somebody who wants to make cannabis business in Europe? Where should he go? Because there are a lot of countries who announced that they will have a medical cannabis program. I remember like Greece, for example. Some work in Portugal, some work in Denmark, some work in Australia. What would you recommend? A strategy to enter the European market?
Okay, thanks, Michael. Actually, I would like to second what Pete has just told you guys a couple of seconds ago. I would first and foremost recommend a stable country. Politically stable, cannabis stable. Cannabis, and it's not unlike other industries, frankly. I mean, I do a lot of mining and oil as well, so big, dirty, stinky stuff that is quite controversial, right? And the attitude toward those industries is fluctuating. Cannabis is the same. You've seen countries that have announced in Europe, take Greece, that, yeah, there's going to be cannabis party, we're going to liberalize and create a real market. Government changes because there are elections, like in any democratic country and in non-democratic countries. Boom, new government. Nah, you know what? Cannabis, not so sure. You don't want to end up in a country where that's the case, especially if it's not a very cheap country. You know, I mean, there are plenty of countries in other continents, and I'm thinking Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia, where, you know, high risk but high reward. It's so cheap to grow stuff there that it might make sense to take the risk. But Europe is not cheap, right? So you want to make sure that the first thing you do is to set up shop in a country where, you know, your operations are legal. And second, where you expect they will remain legal in the years to come. So I totally get what you've just said, Pete, and I can only encourage you to do the same. Of course, Germany, I think, is rock solid, frankly. There's little to doubt from Germany. Spain has been very vocal. I've got some reservations, again, based on how they behaved with other industries, think renewables. At the turn of the 2000s, you know, they were like, oh yeah, we're gonna go green. So all those companies, you just come make electricity here with those nice wind farms and solar panels. It's gonna be expensive, but don't worry, we will subsidize you. What do you know, 6 to 7 years later, government changes like, oh, you know what, it costs me a lot of money, this, so just forget about the incentives. Yeah, but I've invested like hundreds of millions in that country already, and you told me it's based on incentives, and my business model revolves on incentives. Yeah, sorry, man, I cannot do anything for you anymore. So that's what you want to avoid, right, when you start setting up shop abroad, generally speaking, and that's my thoughts on Europe particularly.
Thank you, Rudolfi. And let me just ask you, in addition, because in Germany we just got the first deliveries from South Africa and from Lesotho. And when you normally hear that, you also think, or when they announced it, I thought, okay, this is one of the countries that announced to grow medical cannabis, which will never come to German pharmacies, and I was quite surprised. How come that there's a difference in Lesotho and South Africa?
I think, you know, and again, I'm going to say the same thing. This is new cannabis. It's a new industry. Now we're at that euphoria stage where everybody wants to do it because everybody sees, you know, there are billions in that industry just waiting up to be made, right? And of course, African countries are no exception. They have seen the opportunity just like what they have before with mining and oil. They don't really have the know-hows and financial capabilities. So right now, they're attracting a lot of foreigners and want to attract a lot of foreigners to help them develop their market. And obviously, they know they're not so much a consumer market, but rather an export market for consuming markets. Consuming markets, as we've heard earlier from Jada, it's here in Europe and it's in the US. So that's why now you see those shipments coming up. And there are companies from Canada, from England and even Australia now heavily investing in South Africa, Lesotho, and even Zimbabwe because they have seen that there is an opportunity to grow very good quality hemp and cannabis for cheap and then process it maybe in Europe or processing back home in Australia, and then export it to consuming markets. Yeah.
Thank you, Rudolfi. My next question goes out to Pete. As a Canadian or a Canadian-based salesman, and you also know the US market probably, and everybody is waiting for federal legalization, and yeah, and because then first US companies could export to Europe as well, and that would be a game changer, I think. How do you expect the chances for this scenario?
Oh man, that's a good one. So with federal legalization, it's in discussion right now. I think the Safe Banking Act is going to be a good bridge towards that discussion even further. I do think with the Democratic Party that they're going to use it as a platform for the next election. That's what I would do if I was in politics. They don't really have any promises in their current foundation to say, look, we're going to legalize it during this 4-year period. So why not use that as another indication to say, like, let's bring in some votes. It won't be Biden because I think he's going to be too old for the next presidency, but whoever's the next Democratic leader, using that as a platform to, drive additional votes. So it's a possibility.
So a little patience.
It's a little patience. I think it will be a game changer. It's going to drive a lot of investment capital into the business, a lot. Like a lot of institutional funding will continue to come in, and since it's federally legal, and you can expense stuff properly, I think that'll be a pretty big game changer. And then we're going to start to see, even more capital flood into Europe, like we did when it happened in Canada, right? So it just depends on what they decide to do with that wave of capital and what types of business decisions are made in this international expansion.
Thank you. Rudolfi, safe banking is a good keyword Pete just mentioned. What obstacles can cannabis investors face when it comes to safe banking, which is a very, very big issue, I think?
Right. So the problem with banking is that, and I think the US is a very good textbook example of that. Even when you set up domestic operations, banks are super hostile to lending you money. Even if your business is just going to be in Colorado, you say, look, I just want to set up in Colorado. I have potential customers in Colorado, business partners in Colorado. You go to a bank in Colorado, and they're like, yeah, we're going to think about it. And the reason for that is it's not legal at the federal level. You can only imagine what a bank is going to tell you if you go to that bank and say, hey, I'm going to expand internationally. You know what? I'm going to sell my stuff in, say, Europe, in Germany. It's like, whoa. I mean, if you had told me I'm going to sell it, in Boulder, I'd be like, maybe. Düsseldorf, not so sure. So that's one of the big issues that I think cannabis companies have to solve right now is the funding. But there are perspectives of hope because you can see in Europe that even the EU now is pushing hard toward legalizing at least CBD. And from the moment you have a harmonized regulation that covers an entire region, then banks will feel a bit more comfortable to do that. Certainly, Clifford Chance, historically, I gotta say, we're not disputes-oriented. We're more regulation-oriented and transaction-oriented. For the past 2 years, we've had at least 4 or 5 big banks operating internationally coming to us and asking, all right, I think I'm getting ready to, start opening the green gates, not cannabis, but the dollars. I want to know if I can do that. And I want to know on a country-per-country basis how exactly I can lend money to cannabis businesses, what kind of businesses and what conditions. And then next step would be, if I lend money to fund, cannabis operations in Germany, then can I lend some more money to fund that business internationally? And that's how we see at our own level that there is a shift that is occurring right now, and that's thanks to those politics that are taken at a broader EU level as opposed to country per country level.
It still makes it challenging, like being a business in this environment and dealing with banks. Like, it's one of the things, if you're looking to expand into Germany or open up in Denmark or whatever it may be, how many North Americans do we have in the room today? Okay, so a few. Like, so as a Canadian, like, I had a Canadian business sold, but while we were operating that Canadian business, I was kicked out of CIBC, RBC, BMO, and this is legalized federally, and we were still kicked out of the banks. It was incredible. Even here in Denmark, or here in Denmark, we're in Germany. In Denmark, Danske Bank didn't want to work with us, so we had to go to one of the smaller banks, Jyske, or I think that's what it's called. The Danish friends in here are nodding at me, so I got it. So yeah, banking is a challenging one. Even though they might be given the thumbs up, they have to do the internal checks and know your customers, and not even just that, just do they want to deal with cannabis? So making sure that you've got backups, backup banks, just in case you get kicked out, all of a sudden you have nowhere to put your cash to pay your bills and collect your customer invoices.
Do you think that may cause further problems in the future, because cannabis money is already there a lot, and if you cannot invest with it or deal legally with it, what are the dangers for the future if that is not solved within a certain range of time?
All right, let me say this then, and I think it expands again on what Pete has mentioned and what we have touched upon a bit earlier in our discussion. It's one thing to have a business plan, contemplating in what jurisdiction you're going to set up shop and expand your operations, And then take Greece, you have plans for Greece, and then 3 months later, oh man, change of government, they don't want to do cannabis anymore. I need to find a new place to expand my operations, but hey, at the end of the day, it's fine. I've not invested any money yet. It was just a plan. Problems arises when you have already poured your money into a place. You have applied for a license, or even you have a license or a permit to grow the stuff or to manufacture it or to export it. And a few years down the line, suddenly then there is a change of government. And suddenly, oh, wait, my license being taken away, or I had applied to renew my license, and now the government won't give it to me. Problem is, it's all license-based, right? So if you don't have a license, you don't have a business, and you don't have money anymore. I'm not here to give investment advice in that, what are the alternatives for you as a business to invest in. I'm here to tell you there is a way to get that money back, or to prevent it from going away, and it's quite simple. It's just that you don't know about it, but I do because it's my job. There is a network of international investment treaties. They've been developed after World War II because everybody wanted to do foreign investment to rebuild Europe, rebuild the world. So boom, 3,000 treaties in the span of 50 years being concluded by countries on a one-on-one basis or on a multilateral basis, a bit like in the EU, right? Those treaties are free by definition, they are treaties. But they don't only concern states, unlike most treaties, they concern you as businesses. Why? Because those treaties give rights to businesses. And those rights are fairly straightforward. My right is not to be expropriated. My company taken away by the government, my license taken away, my IP taken away. I have a right to be treated fairly. My investment not only cannot be expropriated, but cannot just play cat and mouse with them. You cannot tell me one day, here's a license, the next day, oh yeah, I don't know if I'm going to give it to you, right? And lastly, but most importantly, you have access to an alternate judicial system. And if I may, just expanding on that thought, say you invest, and I want to take an example of Spain. It's a bit unfair if we've got Spanish friends here today, but again, it's based on very recent history. You invest in Spain because they liberalize the cannabis market. They even give you incentives to grow stuff there because, space is nice sun, fertile soil. There we go. You do that for 5 years, you invest dozens of millions, or a bit less or a bit more, depending on the scales of your operation. And then one day, Spain wakes up and realizes, oh shit, those incentives, they cost me a lot of money. And at the end of the day, I don't make that much money out of it. So maybe it's time to let them go. Right? All of a sudden, your business model collapses because it was based on those incentives. Now, you could go to Spain courts, and the Spain judicial system, comparing it to the French one, say, is roughly similar. It's fine. We have independent judges, but it's very slow. And on top of that, cannabis is political. I can see in my own country, home country, France, that not everyone is very happy about the perspective of even just legalizing CBD, right? You've got people, and not just a few, like half the people really in France are like, I don't like cannabis, I don't want to do any of that. And you go to local courts, and of course you've got local judges. You don't pick your judge, right? So you just have to pray that whatever judge is going to decide your case is sort of okay with cannabis. Alternatively, with that alternate judicial system, it's called arbitration. It is designed for businesses to pick their own judges internationally. And that's one of the most important protections you can get under those treaties.
Thank you. That was a good explanation. My next question goes out to Pete. Despite we have those problems, cannabis or medical cannabis stocks are already traded on German stocks. They are detained in Luxembourg. Luxembourg even changed the medical cannabis law so they could continue to detain the stock, so something moves also. And as it seems recently, in my eyes, Germany is becoming the trading place for European medical cannabis, the main trading place. But the German government does not allow a lot of companies to grow a lot of cannabis. So my next question it goes out actually to both panelists. What do you think? Which will be where will be the main, or which countries will be the main production countries within Europe over the next years? Because it's not going to be Germany, I think.
No, Germany's going to do a high-quality product, probably a very pharmaceutical product. But let's look at Portugal, Spain, Greece, like when that does get into, but anybody that's close to the equator where it's much cheaper to grow, it just makes sense, right? That's what I see. Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's not exactly the answer you expect, I guess, Michael, but my answer is maybe Europe is just not going to be a place where you're going to grow the most stuff. And again, it's part of that evolving cannabis game. It's not just you may want to seize opportunities abroad outside Europe. It's just you're going to have to, probably. Because again, Colombia in Latin America, South Africa, even Morocco, Thailand, those places have the ideal climate to grow the stuff. It's where it's the cheapest in terms of labor. The only problem, again, is a matter of country risk, but we've just addressed that. There are ways to plan ahead of that. But frankly, if I had to tell you what country I think will be growing the most stuff in Europe, I would say Morocco, probably.
Okay, thank you. And my next question also goes to you because you are Australian-based, and we never talked about the Australian medical cannabis program here. Is it worth to invest in? Or can you invest in the Australian medical cannabis program? How is that organized there?
Yeah, well, Australia has made great strides over the 6 to 7 years to liberalize their medical cannabis market. So right now, it's purely medical and industrial, no recreational just yet, even though there are voices already, even at the government level, that are trying to advocate for that. It's I'd say, a major market in the making. We have a few big companies based in Australia. I'm thinking of Can Global, Little Green Pharma, that maybe a few of you have heard about because they are making great strides in Europe. I'd say at the moment what we are seeing is more like Australian cannabis companies investing outside Australia, primarily in Southeast Asia, so Thailand, Africa, and Europe, than the contrary. It's possible, but I think the trend is going to be just a bit like, like Canada and the US, like big local companies doing their own stuff and then trying to export their operations abroad.
Pete, do you have any, because you're doing extraction in Denmark, do you exclusively extract flowers that were grown in Denmark, or do you also operate with flowers that were grown in out of the European community? Or is this a possibility?
Well, that's the next fun part about navigating government regulations. So right now in Denmark, they're not allowing for bulk import. You can import products into Denmark. So the 3 products that are actually in the Danish medical system available for patients, Bedrocan has 3 strains of their flower, and Aurora has a gel capsule that's coming out of Canada. So actually nothing that's been produced in Denmark. But right now the regulations don't allow me to take in flower from, say, Macedonia, bring that into Denmark, process it, and then send it back out. Maybe one day. That's where some of the political navigation comes into play. But in the same instance, there's lots of cultivation happening in Denmark and some really high quality product right now, which is great for us to be able to work with those groups.
And what do you think, how long will that take until, because within the EU, it's actually no problem, but how long will it take till the market is open to other medical cannabis markets, which is, except Canada, still very complicated?
How long until the Danish market is open?
The European market.
Or the European market. It's anybody's guess. I could sit here and try to be a fortune teller with it, but it's anybody's guess. I think what it's really going to take is just proof that cannabis coming from other markets is meeting that standard of quality, whether it's a flower or whether if it's a concentrate and however it's being formulated from there. It comes back down to quality and that level of quality, and it doesn't meet the medical systems. If you take a look at the pharmaceutical industry outside of cannabis, there's pharmaceutical drugs that have their raw ingredients that are manufactured all over the world. And then those are making their way into Europe to be further processed and then dropped into Germany or Denmark or France or whatever it might be. The infrastructure's there, the euphoriant substance licenses allow for that. So it's just really just proving out quality and then just following the little pathways that are already established within the pharma industry.
So we're talking about things like GMP, and my next question to Rudolfi, because you just mentioned the cannabis market in Thailand, the medical market. I also read a lot about it. I did some research that it's existing already. This is no fake news or so. The medical cannabis market is already existing in Thailand, but I also read it's kind of on a private level, or do they know something about GMP and like professional production?
Okay, look, I think it's fair to say that the cannabis market in Thailand, the legal one, is fairly new. In a way that I think still in the process of developing their regulations. Again, we only have a few examples of companies from Australia, say, investing in the market. I don't know to what extent we're really looking at GML and all that stuff at the moment, precisely because it's still in the making. Interestingly, about Thailand, it's new, but it's not so new because it started in 2018 when the government started to say, okay, we're going to liberalize the market. The following year, the government decided to take away all the patents for cannabis-based medicine that were being developed by US and Japanese companies. You can imagine their reaction when they were told, we're going to stop all the foreign patents on cannabis because, you're foreigners. And then they're like, no, okay, it's fine. We're going to make it real. And boom, they really liberalized the market. I think it was early 2020. So again, opportunities, but I think we're not quite there yet. It's not comparable to the regulations we have in Europe at all, let alone in America. So again, word of the wise, interesting market, full opportunities, but just got to be a bit careful.
Thank you. My next question to Pete is more Europe specific, because we all know you export, you sell most of your products to Germany. Are there any other European countries you're already exporting to, or is there anything you expect that you have other countries? Because a few already have a medical program, but they are not as big as in Germany. What do you think is next?
It's more on the expectations, right? So the various cultivators that we're working with, and then just helping get their product to other countries. We're seeing flower from Denmark being sent to Australia and New Zealand, Germany. Flowers going over to Poland now. So Yeah, there's markets available. We have our eyes open for just markets that have an established rec program or rec medical program, an established program where, hey, they're either pointing to the German monograph or they're pointing to something that says that we accept this type of product. In the, I don't know, the sense of international business, as a small business trying to go in at a government level and try to burn your own path, it's very, very expensive, right? We always find it's better to find the local specialists, right? So trying to find distributors in Poland or Czech Republic or Spain or Portugal. That's really, you know, as you talk about expectations, that's where we're at right now as an organization, is finding those specialists. If there's any out there, hi. But really, yeah, finding those specialists that say, look, we need product in Spain, and we're a distributor. That's the type of organization that we want to work with, and it just makes, from an international business perspective, it makes us not have to be experts in every single market. What we can do is just rely on strategic partnerships, and that makes the business actually run a lot faster.
And my next question goes to Rodolphe. What do you think we didn't talk about South America yet? When I think back in 2013, Uruguay was the first country worldwide to legalize cannabis and medical cannabis, both, as I know, Argentina legalized, Colombia legalized, and the only player that is mentioned sometimes is Colombia, but not Argentina, not Uruguay, and there's also more rumors coming from Colombia, but no products so far. So what's in South America? What are the expectations for there?
Not sure I have an explanation for that. It has to do, I guess, in the case of Uruguay, they were the first adopters, the first movers, so that helps. But they still have a very small economy compared even just to Colombia. And even more so Argentina. Argentina, not too sure, but again, they have an interesting history of treating foreign investments in a certain way. Since the early 2000s, that might make more than just a few businesses a bit reluctant to dive in there, you know, and I certainly understand that. One country I've not mentioned, though, Michael, is Mexico. And that's a very interesting case, I think, because it was, you know, all over the news earlier this year. Oh my God, Mexico is gonna do it. And Canada was shaking. It's like, oh my God, they're going to take over, you know, the lead in the Americas. Well, we're still waiting to see it happen. I think it's happening now thanks to the courts. But as it happened elsewhere before that we know of in Europe. But that is certainly going to be a huge market from the moment it opens up, and certainly it will open up to foreign capital. So I guess my eyes right now are turned toward Mexico because I expect they're going to end up opening up. But at the moment where it's still, well, it's already legal, probably Colombia takes it all, for now at least.
Yeah, Colombia is also, I've heard a lot, seen a little. Do you know anything about the Colombian cannabis market?
Oh, sorry.
It was to you, Pete, sorry.
So Colombia, like we just saw the news and announcements where Colombia is should be allowing or is allowing now for the export of flower. So that's going to be game changing for the organizations that have invested into Colombia. Again, just trying to navigate those rules and regulations and do some political advocacy to make changes, right? And we're seeing those changes happening. I was just chatting with a group the other day, and they're actually saying that they're seeing some reminiscences or some policies that are starting to be put into place to allow for more of a localized market. And actually, I see a lot of the South American companies looking to actually just supply down in South America. Brazil is starting to become a market where it's consuming medical cannabis. One of the investors into our company is out of Brazil/Toronto, and they also have an investment into a distribution company in Brazil, and they're looking for product, and it's a growing market. It's actually very cool to see what's happening there. So I think maybe they might be looking to more, I shouldn't say localize, but onto that, just supplying their continent right now. As you know, many of those companies have struggled. Like some of them have gotten the EU GMP stamp and certification, but many have struggled to get that level of certification. So why not ship to a more localized market where it's less expensive for shipping, and the market is growing, so get a foothold. So yeah, it's cool to see what's happening down there.
Very interesting, thank you. Rodolphe, my very last question goes out to you. We heard about a lot of countries now who are planning to open up for cannabis investments. And my very last question is from the perspective of the consumer, of the patient. How many of those countries also have a medical law or a medical program that works for the patients already? Or do they first settle up the investments and then make the program or open the program for the patients?
I think there is a tendency in running trials before opening it to the patients. It's certainly, certainly the case in France, where right now we're conducting trials, active ones, and the products being supplied or in part from Australia. And you look at Thailand, it's a bit the same, at least officially. The idea, when you liberalize the medical cannabis industry, is still to take a precautionary approach. So you don't want to make products accessible to all the patients right away if you don't know what the products are. So I think in most jurisdictions, certainly still that are developing their medical cannabis market, the goal first is to have a good product. And that's where foreign companies come into the picture and they share their know-how that they have already accumulated in other jurisdictions. And then in a second step, when the government is sort of happy with the development of the product and has some guarantees, as Pete was saying earlier, they need to see guarantees, then they open it up to the patients and to the medical profession as a whole. But it's still a two-stage process in most instances, yeah.
It was crystal clear, thank you very much. And I see we're nearly out of time, and I think we should open the question round. So, any questions in the audience? Yes. Anthony.
Thank you for coming to meet me. I appreciate it. I'm trying not to be shy. Yeah. Hi, thank you for this, for the panel and for the good conversation. I'm a first timer here, so I'm very happy to be here and join you all. I have a pharmaceuticals background. Have been working all my life in pharmaceuticals, and I see these trends as very interesting. On the one hand, I have questions because pharmaceutical large companies tend to synthesize natural products eventually. I haven't heard any word on that in the whole meeting, and I don't know if that is a ghost that is out there or not. Maybe in the future, not so far or not so recent future, I don't know. But that's not my subject. My subject is I'm a German citizen living here in Berlin, but I represent 2 Colombian companies that sell CBD and CBG. And I'm very happy that we heard for the first time in more detail about Latin America. I have good news. Panama has just gone through legalizing medical cannabis yesterday, so they're going to sign off the bill next week. And I think after Panama, all of Central America will continue because it's kind of a halo effect for the other countries as well. And you know that Panama has a very large free trade zone, so they are very, very capable of exporting into the rest of the world. We are very interested as companies to come into European market, and I find it, being new to this market, I find it very difficult to make contact, so that's why I'm here. So if anybody is interested in making a contact with Colombian companies, I'm here. Thank you, that's all.
Oh, so really more of a statement. All right.
It was a good statement.
Thanks for the nice statement, yeah.
Thank you, Ngayo. Yeah, am I on? All right, let me just take off my mask. Hello, everyone. My name is Javier. I'm from Resin Seeds. We're a Spanish seed bank, creators of Canatonic, ACDC, and some of the first CBD strains to be out in the market. And we're doing a lot of consulting work in Thailand and now in Mexico. I'm actually Mexican, so I have a little bit of perspective on what's going on there. And in Thailand, as you mentioned, we're working with Golden Triangle Group, is Asia's premier leading cannabis company. They will have EU certification flowers available in Europe by spring of 2022, and medicinal cannabis oils will be released and sold exclusively by the government authority, by the Thai government, called the GPO, and they will be selling their oils in Europe in winter of this year. So Thailand already is starting with the EU GMP certification. Mexico, the biggest problem in delays there are with the politicians. It's an inept government. They've been totally unable to fight against the cartels, so they just let the cartels do whatever they want. And in the same vein, they're unable to push forward with legislation. The courts are on the side of the legislation of cannabis, but the politicians are still not able to pull themselves together and push anything forward. There's a massive expectation in local national capitalists that are waiting to invest in Mexico, but they're all waiting for a little bit more clarity. So it's kind of stuck. There's really no vision. There's no way to push forward at present, and it's still completely in the clouds. So it's not really much clarity for you, but it's going to happen when it.
Thank you very much. Can we maybe come to the next question to the panelists,
Yeah.
because we're here to ask questions. Thank you very much.
Do you want to take
We've
that
had
question?
a statement and an update, but soon we'll get a question. Soon. All right, this is probably the last one. That's the question. This is an actual question.
What's the current situation for the cannabis in Australia, for Rudolf?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The current situation for cannabis in Australia? Okay. I'm not gonna lie, it's still a developing market. It's not that big. It is making strides on the medical side. We've got, I think, at least a dozen Australian stock exchange listed companies now, which is quite impressive because, again, it's fairly recent. And not all states have liberalized at the same time. The federal government came around the idea just a few years ago, so it's been growing fast. Just like in other parts of the world, there's been a little bit of a bubble, I guess, in the beginning. And then the stocks have stagnated for a little bit, but you've got those main, like 2-3 main cannabis companies. I'm really thinking of Little Green Pharma, Can Global, and a couple others that now really have established proper operations. It's still not a massive consumer market. It's getting there because of the Aussie way of life, and we're all surfing and wellness and all that thing. So there is potential. I am not too sure whether it is a target destination right now for foreign cannabis companies, certainly, because again, I think what's happening is they are growing their own companies locally, and those companies already have started to invest abroad because, again, of the growing cost and manufacturing costs. So I see it more as an outward cannabis destination than an inbound or inward one. That's pretty much the state of the affairs. You've got more and more people at the politician level that are pushing for recreational cannabis to be legalized, and that's in the wake of Canada and the US that are still revered in Australia due to their relationship in the Commonwealth, etc. So I think we're getting there, and certainly Aussies do smoke pot, and not just because of headaches or cancer. So there is potential, but it's not as fast moving on that specific front as it could be in other jurisdictions, I guess, to be perfectly fair and transparent. The shops, specialty shops. Yeah, I'm not too sure we're going to see them anytime soon. And you need to be aware they have a funny relationship to vice stuff in Australia because pot is okay somehow, but cigarettes are like $25 a pack. So it's not a clear-cut market. And no, I'm not so sure we're gonna see specialty shops very soon. I have hopes, but just not for tomorrow.
Thank you, Rodolfi, and we're really running out of time. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Rodolfi, for your expertise. It was really unique. Thanks a lot. And thanks a lot for listening. Enjoy the ICBC.
Thank you, the three of you. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all the questions, but we had updates. Don't forget, food and drink downstairs. Go see the exhibitors. Also, 400 euros for the VIP ticket for the Global Investor Forum in Zurich next week. All right, coming now to discuss emerging markets. Let's hear it for journalist and influencer.